I want to start at the end, the closing speech from Grapes of Wrath, given by Ma, one of my favorite characters in all books of all time, where she says, "I ain't never gonna be scared no more." Was, though, for a while it looked like we was beat. Like we didn't have nobody in the whole wide world but enemies, like nobody was friendly no more. And we would feel kind of bad, scared too, like we was lost and nobody cared. You see, a man lives in jerks, she says. A baby is born or someone dies, and that's a jerk. He gets a farm or loses it, and that's a jerk. But a woman gets along like in one flow like a stream, she says. There are levees and there are waterfalls, but the river keeps on going. I imagine this Sunday we feel a little bit like Ma. A little bit like nobody's our friend or the enemies circle about. This Sunday has been months in the making, anticipating this moment as we imagined that you might need a little hope. James Luther Adams, our one and solitary theologian from the 20th century who makes so much sense, says, liberalism, he's pointing to us, this tradition. He says, liberalism holds that the resources, divine and human, that are available for the achievement of meaningful change justify an attitude of ultimate optimism, hope. He argues that we don't just need hope, that we know hope. That our only answer to the feeling of nobody being our friend or the enemy circling about or the anxiety we might feel today as we walk toward Tuesday is hope. Whether you are optimistic or pessimistic or concerned or carefree, I think you know what will happen this week. I think you know that we don't know right now what will happen this week. But the spiritual work to do today is not to fret and fever over the election. The spiritual work is not to imagine a future that has yet to arrive. The spiritual work is to live into the promise of grace. That no matter what happens on Tuesday, we will be fine. Now, before you dismiss that outright, let me say a few more things. I am optimistic about our country despite this election. There are real concerns on both sides of this one, including the fact that we seem to have devolved into a capacity to forget that we should be civil. That we have devolved into a democracy that seems more about who not to vote for than who to vote for. The other day I was walking into a hardware store to get a fitting for a hose, a common thing that we all do. A man walking toward me had a shirt that so disgusted me I had to stop and take measure of my feelings about him as a human being. It was an election shirt. I'm not telling you whose side he was on. He chose to purchase the shirt, I thought. He chose to wear the shirt that day to the hardware store. Hoping for what reaction, I thought. The only reaction he could get was that his side would be giving him a thumbs up and a high five, making everyone else feel uncomfortable. No one in their right mind from the opposition to that shirt would confront him. And I stood in the gap between my hope for humanity and this man's intentions at the hardware store. There are real concerns about our inability to see one another, to get past the yard signs, the bumper stickers, the T-shirts. And this election has raised the ire of almost everyone we know. Yet I am hopeful that we can heal the divide. But first things first. This election is not something to ignore or sweep under the rug, no matter how fatigued we are about it. Believe me, I can hardly stand hearing any more news about this. And recent developments make me wonder how corrupt our systems are when law enforcement put their thumbs on the scale in a blatant political move. I am worried, and we should be worried. This election has in some ways held us captive for months on end, and the good news is only that it's almost over. Whether next week it will be over or not, that's a whole other question. But I hope it will be. Now, lest you leave here with the thought that this place is too political, which I've heard so many times, know that there is a long history in America of this Sunday being a Sunday of election sermons. The Puritans had a tradition of preaching fiery sermons that basically said, if there are problems in our society or with our leaders, it's because of you. I will not do that. There is a history of sermons that have been preached that were meant to only remind the churchgoer that this is Caesar's world that we participate in on Tuesday, and the only world that matters is God's world that we participate in on Sunday. I will not say that. And there have been blatant political sermons which took so-called social issues and put them in front of the people in the pews so that they might understand that voting one way or another would make them either a sinner or a saint and put them in jeopardy with their standing in the church. That happened last election here in Dallas in some churches. We don't do that. What we do is we honor the history to speak spiritually about this moment, to honor the prophetic tradition which challenges society and us in it, to name what is happening for all of us. And right now, that name is anxiety. The ancient wisdom here is to first and foremost remember that no president will save us anyhow. The people came to Samuel and asked for a king to rule over him. This is an ancient story, maybe more than 4,000 years old, right? He said, God is the only worthy king. Man is not fit to rule and will make a mess of it. I'm paraphrasing. Frederick Buechner said, since Samuel didn't have the pep he once had, he finally gave in. And the experiment was up and down from there, and mostly down. The kings of Israel were horrible. The message was then, as it is now, that not that we don't need leaders. The message is to be careful what we wish for from leaders. And in the end, they aren't going to save us. In the scope of time and the trajectory of our country's history, I think we have little to fear of this election. For one, presidents can influence policies and the courts, but they do not save or destroy a country. The Unitarian minister Forrest Church said in 2008, though FDR, with the advice of a wide range of brilliant counselors, came close to saving the country, the President of the United States alone is not going to save us. The President can help and inspire us, can work with and for us. He or she may even, like FDR, rise to the occasion, act with purpose, achieve near consensus, and pull the nation back from the brink of catastrophe, and I might add, push us toward catastrophe. But in the largest sense of the word, he said, the president isn't going to save us. Here the old Puritan preachers were right. The votes we cast for president are much less important than the votes we cast with and in our lives. Then God, greater than all and yet present in each, will save us. God will save us by looking through our eyes and touching our hearts and applying our hands to the saving work of neighborly love. Conversely, wherever you see neighborly hate or people at hardware stores with shirts that just want to provoke, God is absent. God's love unites us. It does not divide us, either within or among ourselves, he said. I say your votes cast with your life may be the best vote you can give. The spiritual value of changing our minds about each other, despite who we support, may be the greatest vote for our thriving and surviving society that we can cast. That means not seeing the man in the t-shirt at the hardware store as the enemy. Jackie Kay in the poem Beth read tells this story beautifully. She's walking by a river alone, and then another walker looking at her as if she were a superstition or the worst dregs of her imagination asks, "Where are you from?" as if to imply you don't belong. And the poet says, "Here. I'm from here." As if to say, we are together in this. No matter what we think of those who walk around with shirts that represent another side, no matter how much we want to perpetuate a North-South divide, American-Mexican identities, citizen and immigrant paradigms, we who live here are from here, first and foremost Americans. We are all from here, and we aren't leaving. I've heard from some of you that you're leaving. You're not leaving. It is our part to dig in spiritually, to ground ourselves in something that is larger than 12 hours on a Tuesday, so that we can see our neighbors not with malice but with hope. I started saying I have hope. And I do. I mean that. I see this moment as important. I do. I know it's important, but I also see it as a moment. In the whole trajectory of the human race, it does not rest on one outcome. I see it as a moment that calls us to think deeply about leadership and about the potential effect we have on one another, whether we will act from a place of fear or from a deeper resource of love and hope. And that we remember an essential thing this week, which Forrest Church said, if the United States of America is about anything, it is about unity amidst diversity. E pluribus unum. Not one for many, but out of many one. It is far less important that the trains run on time, even that all the passengers have a government stamped ticket, than that the passengers are willing to take responsibility for one another's welfare. I'm not saying all will be well. I am saying we will be okay. We will have a role to play. And what we need is not a king over us, but to infuse our lives with leadership, to be grounded in a longer view that says this week, this 4 years, next week when we regather is not the beginning and the end. It is a point on a line. And so in a simple sermon on this election sermon Sunday, I do not give you fire and brimstone and tell you you are the problem. I do not say that all this nonsense happening this week is not ours to care for. I say that we are here together, that we can build hope, but only when we see each other together in this. The many for the one. So I end as I did in the beginning with a closing speech. You like that? And I just love that little. I end in the beginning with the closing speech from Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath, and Pa says to Ma as they're driving down the road, "We sure have taken a beating." And Ma replies, "I know. That is what makes us tough. Some fellows come up and die, and their kids are no good and die out, but we keep on going. We are the people who live. They can't wipe us out or lick us. We will go on forever because we are the people. And then she said, Amen and Amen.